All right, we're about 4 months into the service of PlayStation Plus Premium launching, and it's been an interesting journey so far. So much so that I wanted to bring in some people to talk about this because some of the stuff seems kind of weird right now with Sony. We got to get to the bottom of this. But before we get into everything, I do want to give a quick shout out to this video sponsor. Today's video is sponsored by Factor. With the holidays approaching, our schedules are going to be absolutely packed, and rushing around trying to fit in time to grocery shop and prepare meals can be difficult. Factor makes it easy to have fresh, never frozen meals without having to spend hours planning and preparing. Simply choose from a large selection of meals that include keto, calorie smart, chef's choice, and more. Factor delivers the meals straight to your door, letting you cut out the time of waiting in line at the grocery store. My favorite part about Factor or the meals themselves take a few minutes to prepare. It makes things a lot easier for me throughout the day to just pop a meal into the microwave, and 2 or 3 minutes later, I can start eating, and cleanup is a breeze. Factor also offers add-ons like smoothies if you're really on the go. Head to go.factor75.com/spawnwave60 and use code spawnwave60 to get 60% off your first Factor box. That's go.factor75.com/spawnwave60 using code SpawnWave60 to get 60% off your first Factor box. Thanks once again to Factor for sponsoring today's video. Going over here to the expert, had to bring him in, Mystic Ryan. How we doing, Ryan?
Doing all right. Doing good.
Had to bring in. You were there from the start. You were on top of these launches in the different regions. You made accounts for these regions. You were getting the info out there. So you've seen it all from the start, the build up, everything.
One would say, yes.
Good. We're on it then. And then I also brought in Nate the Hate's here with us tonight.
Yes, I am.
I think the biggest thing that I was looking towards premium, because if I go up and down the list, I think essential, it hasn't changed, and they're still dropping games in there, so it's fine. Extra's been pretty good. I can't really say much bad about Extra because there's a lot of games in there, a lot of value, and it's $100 a year. I feel like if I got the PS5 for the first time today, I would probably look at that and say it's worth the upgrade. I don't know if you guys agree with that or not, but that's kind of where my thought is.
I definitely think Extra is exponentially better than what we previously had before the consolidation, when it was PS Plus and PS Now.
Yes.
PlayStation Now monthly updates were abysmal.
When they happened.
I mean, quite frankly, embarrassing. It was still monthly, but you were getting 4 or 5 games if you were lucky, and they were often very questionable.
Yep.
I mean, only 4 months, but Extra so far, it's like, what, 12 to 15 games, all relatively recent, good, varied amount of genres.
I think I'm good with what I've seen in Extra so far. Yeah, I think it's been pretty solid. I haven't really complained about much of the stuff they've added because when they add stuff, it's quite a few games, and they drop PS5 games in there. So, there's a pretty good little lineup there, even from their first-party studios. So, for the most part,
when we get to premium.
Okay, that's the biggest thing here, because to me, that was the tier that I personally was the most excited for, because they started to talk about retro games. They were talking about PS1, PS2, PSP, PS3, yes, but it was going to be streaming. We figured this. But when they started talking about trophy support, they were going to update the frame rate, resolution. There was a lot. It sounded like
they didn't say trophy support.
Oh, that's okay. Yeah.
They a while ago. I was like, they're not going to have trophies. In hindsight, I should have said it
game by game basis.
Optional. Yeah. Because they obviously have done this prior, but remove the mandate, which they did do.
Mm-hmm. But we've had some games that have trophy support. It was cool. Siphon Filter at it, and I was like, hey, that's a fun idea. If we get classic games or Wild Arms, even where we have access to these fun little milestones. I know not everyone's a trophy hunter. I know you obviously are, Ryan. You've done several videos about that.
Occasionally.
Me, I just kind of, if I get trophies, I'm like, it's cool. That's kind of where it ends for me.
I will say, in the context of retro games, they certainly go, I think, an extra mile for people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would say so.
Sort of validate replaying them again.
I have the list of PS1 games here. This is over on Push Square. We have Ape Escape, Hot Shots Golf, Intelligent Cube, Jumping Flash, Mr. Driller, Oddworld, Abe's Odyssey, Resident Evil Director's Cut, Siphon Filter 1 and 2, Tekken 2, Toy Story 2, Wild Arms, Worms Armageddon, Worms World Party.
And the fact that you can read that list
that fast.
and be done pretty quickly.
Yeah, it's the PSP games. Echo Chrome, Echo Shift, Kingdom of Paradise, Loco Roco, No Heroes Allowed, Super Stardust, and Toy Story 3. And that's it. Unfortunate. The PS2 games, they're a bit more. However, a lot of these PS2 games were already on the store, if I'm not mistaken.
We have not seen one new PS2 game.
Okay, that's what I thought.
They're all from the 2016 to 17 program where they re-released PS2 games on PS4.
Okay.
The same ones. So we haven't had a new one.
PS3 games, all streaming. But
all streaming, all old ones. We've not had a new one of those.
This is interesting because, Ryan, I know you and me, the two of us were like 10 or 12 people total that were subscribed to PlayStation Now.
Yeah.
We've seen these before, these games.
They were there.
They were.
Then they took them down.
They took the games away.
They put them back.
They're putting them back slowly. That's kind of the plan right now.
It reminds me of that Obama meme where he's, awarding himself.
Yeah.
For just putting the games back on there. Like, they made a new infographic and everything for Sly Cooper being put on PS Now. And I'm blown away because not only did they do this, but they kind of got away with it because you like look up the tweet and see the replies and everyone's like, "Oh, Sly Cooper's back." And I'm like,
yeah, no,
they took him down. They just put him back.
They took him down. They put him back, and the ones that they put up for the PS3, it was like Thieves in Time and all. It's all streamed.
Yeah, it's all still streaming, but they were there prior. They removed I think 150 to 200 PS3 streaming games. It's a rough number. I don't have the exact one. But they took down a decent amount, including first-party stuff, which in theory they did not have to do. There's no sort of licensing issue that you would think be a problem there. Now They're all just being rolled back in slowly.
Yeah, it's kind of odd the way this is setting up because I thought they would have gone all out for PS1 and PS2 games at least. PSP is kind of weird because the games don't look the greatest blown up. I mean, even worse than the PS1 games at times. But they haven't done a lot. And Nate, I think you had mentioned at one point that it's weird because it seems like they have things just kind of they've been working on in the background, but we just haven't seen any of it.
Yeah, and that is specifically true for PS1 and PS2 emulation. This is something that they had discussions and briefings with third-party partners well in advance of the service actually launching. And they were inquiring about potential support from these studios, what type of titles that these companies would be interested to offer on the service. And as you've said, we have a very select amount of games being there. Now with the PS2, as you mentioned, these were already games that were updated for the PS4, added all the trophy support and such. We haven't seen just a PS2 emulator release. And even with the PS1 games, with them being so scarce, it would make me wonder if there is, in fact, a problem with the emulator that they're using, or if the QA process for these games is backlogged, and maybe third-party partners have since rescinded their decisions of bringing games to the service, or if they are just very slow in this rollout, either deliberately or, I mean, that's the problem with the service, is that Sony's doing everything very secretively, and we're not getting answers. And we just saw the latest update, and it omits PlayStation 1 games. The last PS1 game we got was Siphon Filter 2, which was last month.
Well, here's the thing that's so weird about this situation, why I think it's the strangest thing from the outside looking in, because they've leaked games that we all now expect to show up at some point for the service. We've seen Dino Crisis as part of their marketing, and just the other day, as this most recent update, there was a game in the trailer for some reason, in like their trailer for the rollout of the update. It was Ridge Racer 2, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and this isn't the first time we've seen that game appear. And even with Dino Crisis, it has appeared on PlayStation blog full listings where the game is mentioned to come out that month. All of a sudden, once people notice it, the blog is taken down, it's edited, and the game is removed. And as you mentioned with this last trailer, they had Ridge Racer 2 in it. They take that video down, remove the game, and just act as though it never happened. So there's either a lot of miscommunication between departments, or there is a reason that these games continually get pulled from their intended launch windows, whether it's a disagreement with contractual obligations between the parties, or Sony is getting ahead of themselves without clearance from the third party partners like Bandai Namco in Ridge Racer's case. But how do you continually say a game is coming to the service from the PlayStation 1 or, the classic catalog, and then hours later remove the mention of it and never actually address what is happening? And if it is something as simple as a contractual misunderstanding, just come out and say the title wasn't supposed to be there. It's coming later, down the line in the next, in the coming months. But to act as though it was never mentioned makes you really question what is happening with the service. And is this just kind of a hodgepodge launch of it? And maybe we're still in that soft launch phase of it. It launched early and Sony is still trying to figure out everything behind the scenes.
I mean, that could be it. They could have just rolled it out and been like, we'll work this out as we go along, and it's taking longer. I almost wonder if there is anything with the a la carte also part of like the service, like if there's more to work out there. I'm not sure how the licensing and stuff works in the background with those sorts of things. But it's just so weird that the PS1 and the PS2 and even the PSP are kind of on the back burner when we know there are hundreds of games that they could just pick from off the shelf that even they. Where's Legend of Dragoon?
Yeah, I mean, and that's the thing. You can just look at Sony's own output across those platforms, and there is a massive amount of games. You could look at just the PSP. You have Untold Legends, which at one point was a meaningful IP to Sony. As you mentioned, Legend of Dragoon. There are so many games that Sony could take from their collective library to put on the service that previously wasn't on like PlayStation Now, and we're not seeing that rollout happen. And it's not as though Sony has interest in remaking or remastering some of those PS1 or PS2 or even PSP games. So there's definitely a disconnect with the service and what Sony maybe had originally intended the service to be. And we really need an answer to the question of what is happening, because they're charging a premium for this. And when it launched, and I said I didn't see the value in the service, one of the reasons was I can buy games like Siphon Filter or Ape Escape for $9. Why am I going to give you $100 plus a year when I can just wait for the releases to come to the service and give you $9 or $10 for the title that interests me, instead of now sitting there giving you a massive amount of money and not being offered anything to eat?
I guess that is the nice thing, is technically you can, if you just want to play online with Call of Duty or NBA or whatever, you can just subscribe to Essential and then just see what the upper tiers give you. And if a PS1 game comes along you want, you can just buy it. What are your thoughts on that, Ryan? With what do you think would be holding up PS1, PS2, or even PSP distribution here?
There may certainly be license hurdles, just in the sense that the only one example I know of is Resident Evil. Prior Sony confirmed that they were going to honor your original purchase on PS3, which I think surprised everybody.
Mm-hmm.
And that's true. It does work for first-party games, is at least the only one that I've been able to validate. But at least depending on the region you're in, you're not allowed to buy Resident Evil a la carte. You have to either subscribe to Premium, or if you can buy it separately, your original purchase from PS3 is not honored. It's very dodgy. I don't know 100%. I think there's a region difference there, but
that's an interesting point though, because
that might be one example.
But the PS3, if we had accounts with the PS3 or I guess the Vita or PSP, those had access to PS1 games to buy, and
a ton too.
Right, I almost wonder if that has something to do with it too, where if you have a history of buying this game that we're going to add, they have to either figure out how to give you access back to it on the service on your PS5, or they have to work something out with the...
They've figured it out. Like it works as a one-way path. So this is also something I validated. If you buy on PS4 or PS5, it doesn't go backwards. So if you say wanted to make sure your $6-7, really stretch it, buy it on PlayStation 3 first, you get it on PS3, and then that purchase is validated across all consoles forward. You can't go back. So, it works, but I think they might have a hurdle with approaching other publishers and saying, hey, we'd like to bring this game back. You're interested in, republishing it on on these newer stores. And oh, by the way, here's the option to let that purchase be honored from before because you offered it how many years ago. I'm sure it's obviously complicated to that degree, but it doesn't really excuse the fact that there's simply a massive library here that is just sitting untapped. And I've always felt that because they've caught a lot of flack in the past, let's say 5-6 years for this very reason, which is not having any sort of honor, respect or reverence or appreciation for their library. They don't look very good when their closest competitor has done amazing things when it comes to backwards compatibility, right?
With the Xbox,
yeah. And the weird thing I've always found is that Sony has every opportunity in the book to sort of blow that out of the water. I mean, I think we really took for granted how good PlayStation 3 was with that rollout. At nearly every week, the PlayStation blog had a new PS1 game dropping. Then there was they supported PlayStation Minis on there, right? Minis became available. It was also a great management system for PSP and PS Vita content. They have too much tunnel vision on the new stuff nowadays. Even if it's not super profitable to do all the retro stuff, it eats up resources. We got to build a new emulator. These games don't have the kind of sticky attach rate that new stuff does. You got to foot the bill for a goodwill program.
Sure.
You have to at a certain point. Even if it doesn't seem financially advantageous, you can't just sit here and have years go by where this criticism keeps lingering when you can solve it.
The premium is mostly, the PlayStation Plus premium seems to mostly hinge on the retro stuff. Granted, we're 4 months in.
Nobody's subscribing for streaming.
Yeah, I don't really know anyone who is. And what's interesting is I think that I thought about this. I think Sony will eventually have to make a PS3 emulator. And the reason I was thinking about this is the way that they run streaming now, as you know, Ryan, they basically have PS3s and server racks, essentially. I mean, they have a newer chip that they had essentially built out, I believe, by IBM, but I mean, they look like server racks. Eventually, you won't be able to get those chips anymore. They will cycle through and out, and they'll have to figure something out if they want to keep doing this.
That's the only good that's the only point that can be made about PS3 emulation. We all know it's a massive pain. We know why it would be just a ton of financial resources for maybe very little gain. But the one point that makes so much sense is you cannot have PS3 server blades going indefinitely.
Yeah.
They made them in around 2014.
Mm-hmm.
It's one rack has about 8 PS3 SoCs. And when PS Plus relaunched, my initial thought when the PS3 games got smaller was that, they're not coming back because maybe they're taking some of these blades offline. Maybe their maintenance costs, maybe they can't be energy efficient, Yeah. So I always felt that's the one thing where it's at a certain point they have to do something. I still don't know if they'd ever bother doing emulation, but maybe just saying, all right, let's just contract out a bunch of studios and let's just get some of the prominent stuff out there as, local ports.
To be fair, I mean, at one point PS Now was only streaming, and then eventually they went to download, so it could happen. They could eventually go, you can download the PS3 games now and play them on
but that's
PS5.
for PS4 games on a PS4.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, well, did they have PS2 games? No, I guess that was still just PS3 games that were streaming. I remember you had to rent them at one point. It was weird.
I guess it depends on how you consider it. Like the PS3 HD collections, they're PS2 games, but they're native PS3 games.
That's true. There was
because of that, they still have to be streamed.
Yes, there was another thing that I noticed, and this I kind of put it together after you had done a video on backwards compatibility for the PS5 to PS4. I didn't even realize this was a thing until you were bringing this up. But some of the games on the PS4 don't actually work correctly on the PS5, and they had a list at one point, but it goes further than that because it was Agents of Mayhem and Assassin's Creed. And it's funny because I was like, I want to play Assassin's Creed Syndicate again. I see it's getting added. Turns out I can't actually play it because what's going on? It's blacklisted from the PS5.
Oh, on the PS Plus, they're going to not let PS5 owners download it.
Right.
But if you have a disc or if you have it on your account from PSN, they'll let you download it and play it.
I think I had the disc back in the day, but I traded it in.
It's a problematic game.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, full disclosure, I mean, it's that video I found was an interesting topic. That was very much cherry picking. Like 4,000 plus games work.
Oh
fine,
yeah,
but
it
that's like the most high profile one.
Yeah.
Assassin's Creed Syndicate's a pretty well known game.
It was weird
And
to see
that
them
one's
add it to the service. That's what caught my eye. I was like, oh, cool, Syndicate. And I was like, oh, wait, Syndicate. And because it seemed like, oh, we'll add it after we fix this stuff with Ubisoft or something. It's like, that's there. There you go. It's like, oh,
yeah, Ubisoft acknowledged it too, but then they deleted the tweet. They like said that they were going to look into it, but if you try and Google to find that tweet now, it's gone.
Okay. So
I think their support page, I forget where I saw this, but somebody mentioned that I think they confirmed they weren't actually going to do anything about it. Like a support channel or something said like, we have no team working on that game right now.
So at this point, it's hard to say what's going on with Sony when it comes to the PlayStation Plus Premium. I think they have it figured out with Essential because it's the same thing basically, but Extra I believe is still the best value, and then you kind of just wait for Premium to hopefully get better. I haven't found myself really using game trials personally, so it's me hanging out waiting for cool PS1 or PS2, PSP games to show up. And I guess at this point, do we think, okay, so every time I go, the next update will be better. Do we think we have 2 more updates, I guess, right? November and then December? Do we think that the next 2 updates, either one of them before the end of the year, they have a meaningful PS1, PS2, or PSP drop? Like, not Ridge Racer, but Dino Crisis, I'll say. Not Ridge Racer 2, but like Dino Crisis. That to me would be meaningful.
I mean, maybe. The disappointing thing is that even if it came, that would be all you get.
Yeah.
Dino Crisis.
They need to flood us with these PS1 games like they do with the PS4 and stuff in Extra. They just go crazy with them.
I would like the output to be as fast as Extra.
Yes.
Like, give me like at least 5 or 10 things, and ideally I would like it to be favoring PS1, PSP, and PS2, but we haven't seen a new PS2 game yet.
That's the thing, they have to do that first. Oh yeah.
And they still clog it with native PS4 games, but they're just remasters of PS2 games.
Right.
So like we also like Yakuza, the Yakuza 3, 4, 5 remastered. Those are all considered PS Plus premium game. Okay, here's another reason why they're weird. Grand Theft Auto Vice City, the definitive edition.
Oh,
that's
yeah,
an
that's
extra.
in there too.
That 100% falls in their defined category of premium. That's a PS2 game. They didn't do much to the definitive edition.
That's a good point. It does. I kind of default back to Nate's miscommunication or just randomness from the different arms running this. I don't know. It's very odd. It really
I think
is.
It's better to have Vice City and Extra. You don't want to like lock a really well-known cool game to premium, but like you defined this is what premium is. Technically, I would assume it falls under that.
What's the game? What's the game that you'd be like, all right, this is good. This is good. We got something here.
Out of a classic library? I
mean, whatever. What sounds good to you? PS1, PS2, PSP. Go crazy. You're Jim Ryan for today.
Jim Ryan for today. I mean,
don't break the PS2.
I mean, from like the PSP, I'd like to see them go for, some of the what I'll call spin-offs of their mainline series. Go with Daxter, Secret Agent Clank.
Oh, that could be fun.
Force.
Okay.
Even Siphon Filter from the PSP with Dark Mirror. Games that really define the PSP from Sony's first-party output. And for like the PS1, I mean, there's just way too many games you could list from Sony's own studios there. And with the PS2, once we can actually get some native PS2 games that aren't based on the PS4 HD versions that they had PlayStation Now, I mean, there's still just so many options there. But as you mentioned with the game trials, was that not something that they said they were going to have studios submit trials for pretty much every big release? And
yeah, it hasn't worked out.
I mean, I guess we have to function under the idea that within the next few weeks, we should have a God of War Ragnarok trial before launch or right around launch, correct?
Yeah, that'd be cool.
Seems awfully generous.
Because, I mean, we got 10, I believe it was 10 hours with Horizon.
We got Horizon, yeah.
So, the Horizon one was 10 hours?
No, it was 2 hours, wasn't it? Hold on.
Is it 2
I got it right here. I can figure this out.
Get you pretty deep into that game.
Maybe it's 6 hours.
That was I think that was a 40-hour game for me. It's like 40.
I know
hours.
Death Stranding was like 5, wasn't it?
Technically, isn't that how we thought it was going to be with their first party stuff?
Yeah, that's how they pimped out the service for the game trials, where you get to sample these games for a few hours.
5 hours.
And then you can make your 5 hours for
it says here Forbidden West says 5 hours right here.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that's still a pretty healthy sample.
Yeah, Dying
So if
Light
we
2
get
got 3
5 hours
hours.
of
That's pretty good.
Ragnarok.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's what I want to see the service actually deliver on the promises that they had put forward when they were launching it and detailing it. Because right now, it's still, as I mentioned, it feels like a soft launch. They haven't hit the ground running with anything. It just feels as though they had promised features, put a small sampling out there, and then they took a back seat. I want to see those PSP games, like I mentioned, like Daxter and such, get those games that really define the platform.
Like Tomb Raider Angel of Darkness on the PS2?
No.
Oh.
Not that game. But like that's the thing with like third parties. You're looking at some of the releases coming out even this year. You just had Valkyrie Elysium come out.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you had Valkyrie Profile on the PS2 with, was it Slimeria? Isn't that a perfect time to throw it on a service like this to gain new interest? I know they're doing Lenneth as an HD release coming out in December for, what was it, pre-orders for Elysium.
Yes.
So obviously we wouldn't get that on the service.
But they could have dropped in Star Ocean's coming up here. Could have dropped Star Ocean till the end of time.
Yeah. It's like,
let's drop that in there. I don't know.
There's so much that they could have been doing it as complimentary releases, and we're not seeing that happen here. And it's just a baffling service at this point. And obviously it's going to evolve. It's going to grow. And come June, it could be completely transformed. But right now it is still very basic. And they have to expand upon this because people are going to start having their subscriptions lapse. And they're not going to re-up to the highest tier because they haven't delivered the goods that they promised. And people are going to default to a lower one. And they're likely going to do similar to me. If there is a quality PS1 game coming to the service and they can just buy it for $10, they're going to wait for the game to come. Because right now there is no incentive to give Sony $100+ a year for a service that is not offering you anything.
I think that's still the best option, extra, and then just kind of buy games you want a la carte on the premium service. But the other issue here is obviously people look at Jim Ryan as someone who hates PlayStation's past. So this doesn't, none of this helps. Ryan, what do you got? What's the game? What's the game that they added? You'd be like, all right, we're back.
Well, Resistance Retribution was rated in Korea.
Okay.
So that was kind of like that's a giveaway.
Cool. Yeah.
That's a great PSP game. I'm with Nate though. I was actually super excited to hear that they were, at least in the blog post, announcing this. Like, hey, PSP's in here as well. Awesome. PSP, that's great. I feel like that library really went under the radar over the years. So there's a ton of PSP stuff, without a doubt. But it's a lot of what he said. There's just a gargantuan library here.
I think that's the part that confuses a lot of people, is there are so many games they could pull from, and they could even get crazy. They get the expensive games. That's what I want to see. Get the games that go for way too much money in the secondhand market and just start dropping them on there.
Yeah, and they have their own catalog here. Sony owns a lot of IP from those generations. They published a lot of stuff. So even if working with third parties is a pain, maybe they're not being as cooperative bringing these games back because they have their own plans or whatever, you've still got a really deep catalog here. You can do better than one game a month, sometimes 0 games a month. I think they're in for a rude awakening when June comes back around. So for everybody that initially was excited and they upped their plan right when this relaunched, once it circles back and they have the option to downgrade their membership, that's when they might see the engagement thus far. They might see a drop off.
I'm immediately throwing Mega Man Legends 2 in there because that game is extremely expensive. It 1 and 2 right away, same month. You can just drop them both in. Those go in. Misadventure Tron Bond. We'll just do a 3-pack. Put all 3 of those in there.
I was gonna say that's the most expensive, isn't it?
Yeah, all 3 of them. Drop them in there. We might as well do Mega Man X4 and X5, and just go on the line there, all in the same month. And Mega Man Power Up. You could do that. Maverick Hunter from the PSP. That was cool. But
You actually just mentioned a fantastic PSP line of games when you mentioned Mega Man Power Up. Is Capcom had that lineup of games: Street Fighter 3 Alpha, Ghost and Goblins, Mega Man, Power Stone.
Yep.
Capcom alone is sitting on a treasure
That's
trove.
why I want him to go
PSP
get
games.
Capcom. Yeah, I want him to go get Capcom. I'm going down games that I had I actually typed up a bit of a list here on games that I want. Vanstar Portable was there because I want them to add online support and do all this cool stuff. That'd be fun. Many possibilities. I just need Jim Ryan to get out of the way.
I mean, even when you look at Square Enix, they had the Final Fantasy 1 and 2 ports for the PSP where they enhanced the sprites a bit, which I guess now are redundant with the Final Fantasy Pixel remasters. Jak and Daxter, The Lost Frontier.
No, we don't want that.
Well, someone might.
About Tales of Destiny? Tales of Destiny 1 and 2?
Even an IP that a lot of people really don't recognize as Sony's is Lemmings. And Lemmings is a classic.
Lemmings. I think the last Lemmings was the one on PSN when PlayStation 3 launched.
Yes.
Right, Nate?
That was the last one.
It was.
Nate, we need the bouncer. We need the bouncer, right, Nate? Drop that in there.
We need the bouncer. It's a 2-hour game.
Yeah, but you got to play through it a bunch of times. Come on. And I'm throwing it out there. I don't know how Sony gets it done. We need Way of the Samurai, the first one. Way of the Samurai 1. That game was awesome, and no one played it. Except for me and 3 people in middle school.
Way of the Samurai.
Great game. Great game. Way of the Samurai on the PS2. Check it out. That's when it really got started back in the day with the whole samurai craze. Started it all. 2002.
What about Maximo?
Be okay with that.
Maximo?
I'm okay with Maximo. Yeah, throw that in there. That was like the Ghosts and Goblins or whatever in 3D that they put out.
3D take on it.
Yeah. See, we're just going through games. Just it seems easy when you start just kind of rattling off games. But I know there's licensing and stuff. If we come up with these, it seems like you figure Sony will be able to come up with a nice little list to put together. Even the obvious one like Metal Gear Solid. Konami's terrible at their job. Okay, just go with Metal Gear Solid from them and drop it on there.
I feel like Konami wouldn't be cooperative nowadays with that.
They took them down.
They would just...
they pulled all of them.
They'll repackage them themselves before they let Sony do it.
I guess. I do think there's going to be one meaningful drop. I feel like Dino Crisis will happen, right? That's coming.
Even if it does, it would be just Dino Crisis.
It's something.
I mean, that's the
thing. I don't want just Dino Crisis.
Yeah, I want Dino Crisis 2 to almost be with it the same day with trophy support, which... I mean, we haven't seen a third-party game with.
Okay, how about this?
Yet. Yeah, exactly. Third parties aren't going to mess with them.
How about this? They show up in December, right? Holiday month. They go, okay, here's Dino Crisis, Ridge Racer 2, Parasite Eve. Here's Mega Man Legends 2. They're going to leave one off the table because it's Sony and Capcom. And Daxter on the PSP with Resistance.
That's a fantastic month.
Send it.
And that's why it won't happen.
Exactly.
I would take all that, though. Daxter for sure. I just jumped into Daxter again. That game definitely needs more exposure.
Yeah, I remember that game came with my PSP 2000 back in the day, the silver one.
Ah, the silver.
Came with it, yeah. It was good stuff back then.
Yeah, I mean,
simpler
it's
times.
An underappreciated game. I mean, Ready at Dawn developed it. And...
the PSP Masters.
And then just everyone was like, oh, it's Daxter. Where's Jack?
It's a fun game.
It is a fun game. And if I could play it on the PlayStation 5 or PS4 through the service, it would definitely tempt me. And as Ryan mentioned, the Resistance game from PSP is a fantastic third-person shooter that deserves a lot more love than it got because it was stuck on the PSP. And that's what the PS Vita Resistance should have been, not the abomination we ended up getting.
Yeah, it sucks.
Well, I can definitively say that something weird's going on at Sony because no one can explain it. So, there you have it. There's a lot of fun talking. That's Mystic Ryan right there. That's Nate the Hate down below. All their links are down in the description. Check them out. Go over, say hi. Thanks, everyone, for tuning in with us today where we just kind of complained about PlayStation Plus Premium for like 30 minutes. Thanks, everyone. We'll see you next time.